So welcome. I want to continue this series on mercy by speaking about how forgiveness sets us free and brings healing to our hearts. I'm sure you, like I, have sometimes felt angry towards someone and you maybe unconsciously decided not to forgive them, and so you find yourself twisted up in the pain of resentment. But by the grace of God, you can be free. Now, last time I spoke about the capacity to forgive as a divine gift, and that we need to decide to accept that gift. And God in His mercy is always ready to give this gift to us. Like, the saddest people I know are those who refuse to forgive. They carry this hard heart, burdened by deep resentment, stewing in cold anger, bitter and enslaved to themselves. Now, Jesus told a parable that can help us here. In Matthew's Gospel, He tells about the servant who owed the king, who he served, a large amount of money, 10,000 talents, which is equivalent to something like $6 million in our currency. And so it's impossible for this man to pay back the king. And so he pleads with him, look, just give me time and I'll be able to pay it back. And the king felt so sorry for him. Not only did he just give him time, he actually cancelled the debt. The total debt was cancelled. So we're told this servant then came out from that beautiful moment with the king, having received such a gift, and he's found a fellow servant who owed him 100 denarii, which is the equivalent of about $10. And he started to throttle this man and say, pay me back, or I'll have you and your wife and children thrown into prison. So when the king found out about this, he was not happy because he's an ungrateful servant. And so he really had him thrown out to the torturers. So I'll come back to that business about the torturers. But what's the main meaning here? The main meaning, of course, is that we have had the debt owing to our sin cancelled by what Jesus did on the cross for our sake. And, if you owed $6 million, well, possibly you could find friends or something who might help you to sort of actually pay it back eventually. But it was impossible for us to pay back that debt that was owing to our sins. But God cancelled that debt. God the Father sent His only Son, who took upon Himself the sin of the world and broke its power for our sake. And He forgave. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You see, we are the beneficiaries of this incredible gift of our salvation in Jesus Christ. And so after having received so much, then we need to forgive those little peccadillos, as it were, the small sins that have been done against us. Nothing in comparison to what has been done against God. And so that's the thing. We've received so much, so we should give so much in forgiveness. So when we realize the immensity of this gift of mercy, then it's easier to forgive others, really. But if we doubt God's mercy, then, of course, and don't believe in it and what He's done for us, then, of course, we tend to really project condemning God upon others and that His condemnation upon others. And so we find it very difficult to forgive because we haven't yet received inside ourselves the mercy of God. So the first movement is to actually accept the mercy of God for yourself and to realize that you're the beneficiary of this incredible gift of mercy that you could not have earned. You could not in any way, you didn't deserve it, but God in His graciousness gave it to you. And so because we've received so much, then we should give so much. We've received freely, we should give freely, So in this parable then, he was obliged to pay back out of gratitude, you see. Instead of demanding payback from the other servant, he really pays back to the Lord in gratitude by forgiveness, right? So we can hold on to resentment, can't we? We can hold on to this revenge attitude. We want to sort of somehow or other see the person suffer who's offended us in some way or another. Inside the heart, we're a bit like that. And so it's important then to allow the Lord to give us this grace. The master said to the servant, "Were you not bound then to have pity on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you?" So you see, resentment poisons the soul. Now, when we forgive, it's really for our own sake, first and foremost, because resentment distorts your whole interior life. It's a sickness that begins in the spirit and can actually affect the whole body, the emotions and everything. Even bodily ailments like physical disorders like stomach ulcers, high blood pressure, depression, nightmares, nervous twitches, excessive stress, arthritis, all those sort of conditions can be actually coming about as a result of a psychosomatic sort of process where what's happening in your interior spirit is actually being manifest bodily. Yeah? So Jesus likens this state as being thrown to the torturers. So this man who would not forgive, he's thrown to the torturers. And that's true. The most tortured people I know are people who cannot forgive. It's hell on earth. And it's a hell on earth that you inflict on yourself. And the only way out of the prison is to forgive. It's forgiveness then that sets us free. It's not about so much being fair to others. It's being fair to yourself, really. Forgiveness opens the prison door, really, and you can walk free. I want to give you an example. I was walking down the aisle after celebrating a healing mass, and I was accosted by a troubled woman. I could see she was troubled. She had it all over her face. And she said, "How dare you talk about me like that?" I'd been talking about forgiveness, and I'd never met her before, but she thought I was talking about her, because it was speaking to her about her condition. And when she cooled down, after a while I convinced her that I wasn't talking specifically about her. She shared with me what had happened, that she'd lost her sister in tragic circumstances, where a man had actually burnt down the house of her sister and her partner. They were burnt to death. And the 3 children survived. And now this woman was looking after the 3 children. And she hated the man who had done it. He'd been arrested and tried, and she went to the trial, and she couldn't think she wanted to think of the worst possible thing that could happen to him. She just hated him so much, and she would never forgive him. So she shared this with me, and I said to her, "Look, I tried to be gentle, but I said, look, I'm sorry. I can see in you have a cancer that's eating you away. And unless you're really able to come to grace of forgiveness, it's going to get worse and worse, and it's eating you up. It's going to destroy you. It's a cancer inside of you, worse than the bodily cancer. It's a cancer in your spirit. And it will, and I could see it was twisting her up. She was twisted up as a person. And so she stormed off. She wasn't very happy about my diagnosis. But then she went home and talked to her husband, and he said, I think he's got a point. So she came back sometime later, and we were having another healing mass. And this time I was leading through the people through a prayer. And the prayer was like, I pray now for the grace to forgive that one person in my life who was hurt me the most, who's the greatest enemy that I have, the one I find hardest to forgive. I now choose to forgive that person. And she said, as that prayer was being prayed, she realized that's what she had to do. She had the revelation, and she felt the grace to do it. So she went to confession, she told me later, not to me, but to another priest. And she said, I confessed my resentment, my bitterness, and my hatred for my sister's murderer. And then he led her through a prayer of forgiveness where she said, so-and-so, I forgive you for murdering my sister. And she said, when she was telling me, she said, now I feel free. She said, and I could see she was free. Like her face had previously been somewhat contorted and sort of really disfigured. And now she was, obviously her face was shining. And she was so happy because she realized that she'd created a prison for herself. Like that man was in prison, but so was she, because she was hating him so much. And she realized that she'd been imprisoned by her own hate. And now she was being set free. And her whole body was relaxed now. Her whole disposition had changed. She was back to who she really is. And that can happen kind of where, resentment can take hold of the heart. And we need a healing. And the healing can only come through forgiveness. When you make that choice, remember last time I said it's a gift from God and it's a choice that you make. It's not the feelings that matter, it's the choice. So it can really block too any other healing that we need to have in our lives. Oftentimes in the healing ministry we find that people who have deep resentments, there's a blockage there to receive any other healing that God may want to bring them. I had a woman once, she come up to prayer on a prayer line, and her presenting problem was that she had all sorts of headaches, and she had sort of like a lot of anxiety, and she was just disturbed in her spirit, and she wondered what was going wrong, because and at night time she couldn't sleep. She had all these terribly bad dreams that she identified as maybe being demonic. So anyway, I began to pray with her. And as I prayed, I sensed something. I said, is there someone who you haven't forgiven? She said, how did you know? I said, I don't know, I just sensed there might be somebody you haven't forgiven. It turned out it was her husband, because he'd walked out on her a couple of years ago. And she hated her husband. And she was really furious with him. And I said to her, it's very hard to pray for healing for you unless you forgive your husband. Do you think you could do that? She said, I don't think so. I said, well, could I pray that you would actually have the grace just to, make a start? And she said, I don't mind you doing that. So I began praying, and I explained to her that forgiveness is a decision. It's not the feelings, because she obviously had really strong feelings here. And so anyway, after a while, I said, now, do you think you could just say, so-and-so, I forgive you for walking out on me? And she said, I think I can. And so she said it. And then I saw immediately a transformation take place. It was just so beautiful. As she said those words, there was a major transformation take place in her heart, and obviously in her whole demeanor and her whole attitude. And so it was a great grace, really, that she received at that moment. And I'm thinking also of a story told to me by Father Richard McAleer, a similar thing, really, probably a little bit more dramatic, where a woman came to him and she had cancer in her stomach. And he started praying with her, and the same thing, he experienced a sort of a sense from God that there's a barrier here. And so he said to her, he says, someone you haven't forgiven. She said, how did you know? It was her sister, because there'd been an inheritance battle, and her sister had got off all the money. And this lady was very upset and very angry with her sister and held contempt towards her. And so Richard said, well, look, you'll need to forgive your sister. Otherwise, I can't pray for the healing of the cancer. And she said, oh, I'd rather die of cancer than forgive. And so he obviously had some work to do. So over a period of a few months, he worked with her and counseled her and helped her get to that place where she could actually make that decision to forgive her sister and let it go. And so that's what happened. And then a few months after that, he said, this woman came back and she said, I've just been to the doctor and they can't find the cancer anymore. You see, that doesn't mean, of course, that people who've got cancer have necessarily a forgiveness problem. But in this case, it seemed to be connected, because once she'd forgiven, the cancer was healed. And so that's my encouragement to you today. If you're aware of any resentment you're holding in your heart to any person, any bitterness, any desire for revenge that you hold within yourself, any hatred that you have, well, it's like a cancer eating away inside of you. And there is a choice you can make under God's grace to let it go, to choose to forgive. And the healing will come to you. And maybe too, you've been praying for some healing in your life of one kind or another, and it's not happening. Well, it can't happen if you have unforgiveness in your heart. It's the biggest barrier to any healing process. We know this from the Inner Healing Ministry, that again and again, what's most important is to forgive. And when the forgiveness happens, then the healing can occur. So I encourage you then to think about and reflect on your life and just be open to what God would show you. It's a tremendous freedom that comes when we forgive and let go and give over the judgments to God. Don't any way want to hold that person under judgment anymore or under condemnation, but I make a choice to let it go and give God the opportunity to bring a deeper healing to the heart. Bless his name.